All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to the our last talk in this set. So cocktail hour is fast approaching, and we'll hopefully get there. I want to introduce Art Harman. Art Harman is a director of the Coalition to Save Manned Space Exploration, which supports a bold new space program to actually get us to Mars and to the moon within a generation. He was a legislative director and space advisor to Congressman Stockman, who represented the Johnson Space Center in Houston, wrote space policy for the Trump campaign, has briefed White House staff on space policy, and is a frequent media commentator on space policy. So please welcome Art Harman.
Well, thank you all so much for attending. I appreciate it. Many people don't know how to judge President Trump's space program as it develops. As a candidate, many were hesitant about Donald Trump's views on the space program. Some took an early comment he made about fixing potholes before we explore space as meaning he was anti-space. Later in the campaign, but he did talk about restoring our space program to greatness. And later in the campaign, Trump expressed a much more bold and focused space policy. I advised, and one reason I'm speaking to you today is I advised and wrote some of the president's campaign policy and language, and I briefed his White House advisors on space policy, and which I'm amplifying upon at some of my other presentations here as well. Space advocates, whether supporters of moon or Mars bases, new space, NASA and industry, and planetary probes should not fear the president's developing space program. The president is nominating Jim Bridenstine, who's a Navy pilot and congressman, to be the NASA administrator. If you look up the American Space Renaissance Act, you'll find that you'll be able to read some of what he believes are America's goals should be in space. And I think we'll see. I think that matches some of the president's views and the vice president's views as well. And so this will be look that up, and you'll get a little sense of where they're coming from. He is an advocate of greater commercial space ventures and partnerships, and is in favor of a serious focus on the moon and Mars. This offers a new hope for all who dream of or involved in getting to the moon and Mars in a generation. Aerojet Rocketdyne Vice President, oh, by the way, that's the bill, H.R. 4945 in the previous Congress, but if you Google it, you will get the bill. The Congressman Bridenstine believes that when Clementine discovered the water ice on the poles of the moon, and these black areas are where no sun ever shines, ever, on the moon, and where they've detected water, because over billions of years there's been everything from comets and asteroids and everything that impact the moon, and water that would have simply evaporated everywhere else on the moon in those craters on the of the moon. It didn't evaporate. It's still there, and there's enough to sustain human life for a long, long time, to create rocket fuel, to create breathing air, drinking water, and everything mixed with minerals on there we need to have a vibrant industry. Bridenstine's Space Renaissance Act would seek to permanently secure the U.S. as the preeminent spacefaring nation. It would create a 20-year plan that outlines broad goals, including a designated 5-year range for American astronauts to land on Mars. You see, one thing we just have not had, I don't know, since we built the space station, was exact plans saying we're going to go here or here by X date. And folks I know at NASA have just been, trying to hold on. It's sort of like, well, everything we do, the little asteroid mission, we're trying to make the things that we're being forced to do on that applicable to going to Mars and so forth. But all you got to do is set a date. We're going to Mars by, 2033, 2035, whatever. We're going to the moon in the 2020s. And those folks will get busy. They'll roll up their sleeves. The bureaucracy at NASA will kind of go away, like sending, a lazy kid to Marine boot camp. When he comes out of boot camp, he's a different person, and he'll be back like in the Apollo days when there was sort of a lean fighting machine. There was a sign that they used to hang at Kennedy Space Center in the Apollo program. You just see it taped on walls and so forth. It just said, "The moon." Period. That's all. And the idea was, you're saying, "Oh, what are we doing today?" Going to the moon. All right, let's get busy. And and the public responded with great support. Space today is public support is kind of a mile wide, an inch deep, and it shows when Congress is projecting dead flat budgets from here on out until the year James T. Kirk is born in the 23rd century. And we won't get to Mars, we won't build the USS Enterprise or do anything else like that if we're talking dead flat budgets and so forth. Back to I was talking about Bridenstine and Clementine. When he saw this here, the discovery of water ice on the moon in sizable quantities, he's like, this should have transformed the space program. It should have been our Sputnik moment, as he said, that says, oh my God, look, it's there. Let's go get it. Let's go set up industries and so forth. But it was kind of shrugged off, and we didn't. Bridenstine also believes that NASA should undergo reorganization and to alter its mission with a clearer focus, ridding itself of extraneous responsibilities handled elsewhere within the government or private industry. And NASA has got, let's see, that's the next slide. But NASA in the 60s, its mission was, let's go to the moon. And there were a few other things, probes, things sent to Mars and orbital, Earth orbital things. But today, the budget, that $19 billion, is spread out across so many different things that human space exploration is a relatively minor part. So I think that we'll see that changing. Now, Vice President Pence has reconvened the National Space Council, which existed to help get us to the moon. It existed in the 90s and so forth. And this will be a really focused look on what we should do, when we should do it, the budgets we're going to need, and get America back to where we should be in space. So the Council offers a new hope that we can get a solid roadmap to the future, support for adequate budgets, and a transition to more public-private partnerships. And Bridenstine and the President and the Vice President are all big supporters of more public-private partnerships. Now, one thing to note, this isn't partisan. Space never should be partisan, or opposed just because it's from a different party. Space has always transcended party lines, and that's how we got to the moon. That's how we built the space shuttle, the space station, and it's how we will get to Mars. Bickering will destroy all that, and we won't get to Mars, the moon, or even build the deep space gateway. As an example, Ben Roberts, who worked on space issues with Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House during the Obama administration, he says, my initial reaction to establishing the National Space Council was that he was skeptical, but over the last several months, I think I've become a lot more positive about the idea. So let's keep space bipartisan, and then we can get the support needed in Congress. We can actually get to where we want to go. In the past number of years, the moon has always been off limits. It was essentially forbidden in the last administration, but now it's back on the table and to allow us to more safely learn how to live on Mars. We have, if we want to get to Mars in the 2030s, we have a limited number of windows, launch windows every 26 months to get there. Now, InSight and MAVEN I use as an example of what we should not be doing if we want to get to Mars in the 2030s. Why? It used up launch windows that would have better been used for robotic precursors to locate water, the best water and mineral areas with least radiation, and things like that, and the Mars sample return. The 2020 Mars rover will gather samples of the Martian soil. But until this year, every time I ask NASA, what are the plans for getting the follow-on mission to take the samples and send them back to Earth so we can really analyze them and make sure there's no black swans that would make it more dangerous to live on Mars. We already know there's perchlorates in amounts that would be, I don't know, about 1 million times an EPA Superfund cleanup site on Earth. Mars is such that we have to learn these lessons in advance, because if we plonk people down there and just a little bit of perchlorates come in through with people every time they go out, then they're going to be very dead. So we have to be very careful. So this year, finally, just a few weeks ago, they announced that they are looking at a 2026 sample return mission to go pick up those canisters left by the 2020 rover, send them back, we can analyze them, and then, and only then, we'll really know what we need to know. And we might even learn if there is some sort of microbial life on Mars. And that would be very valuable to know. Not finding it, well, if you landed something in Antarctica, you might not find any life. So, it can depend on where you land. But if we do find it, that's going to transform things. One of the recommendations I made at the beginning of the year to the new administration was indeed this. You've got to prioritize getting a sample return, and you've got to prioritize what we're going to do with each successive launch window that we have between now and the 2030s when we want to be on Mars. This is just an example of some of NASA's missions, and it's sort of the mission creep. And again, the President and Bridenstine believe that we should be focusing more on deep space human exploration, and I think we'll see some great results from that. You can look and read some of the President's statements on space. On space. One of the things was just a simple little exclamation. He said, "We stopped." Where was the continuation of going to, build a base in the moon, go to Mars? Well, we stopped. We did the shuttle probably for too long. We've done the space station, but it never really got used for its highest and best use, which is simulating Mars missions and things like that, and really and getting closed loop life support. They have on the space station what they joke about as yesterday's coffee is today's coffee. So there's some recycling that's done, but it's not a closed loop such that we can plunk people down on Mars and be confident by the next 26 months when the next resupply mission comes that they won't have run out of something that they really, really, really need. The vice president, too, in running the National Space Council, he said, "Welcome to a new era of American leadership in space. Our nation will return to the moon, and we will put American boots on the face of Mars. And under President Donald Trump, America will lead in space again." Again, it's sort of general statements, but the vice president is chairing the Space Council, and this is the best way to involve all stakeholders in space, new space, NASA, industry, universities, everybody all working together to get us a plan that can take us to the moon and Mars as soon as possible. Some of the things to look for from the Space Council: increasing public-private partnerships. Should we be using more SpaceX rockets or New Glenn rockets, or should we have Orion and SpaceX and Blue Origin capsules? Where's the money best put to use? And so I think that will help create a structure that works best for everybody, including taxpayers. Deregulating commercial space. All three of those players, Bridenstine, the president and the vice president, are big on deregulating space. And so I think we'll see areas that can be deregulated in ways that will allow entrepreneurs to take their idea and go to the moon with it, or Mars, or orbit, and in a lot easier and smoother ways. Canceling the asteroid redirect mission. It should have been canceled on day one. It's been it is in effect was going to be a decade-long detour from ever going to the moon or Mars. Unfortunately, the Deep Space Gateway looks, if it becomes our policy, that could be a decade-long detour from ever getting boots on the ground where we want them. Accelerating EM 1, 2, and 3, SLS flights. The more, if we're waiting every 4 years for one single launch, number one, you don't get the keep staff who know what they're doing. They're not kept in practice, and they'll retire before the next one or whatever. But more importantly, we didn't get to the moon by waiting like that. We won't get to Mars like that. We've got to increase that, and Congress and everyone all agree. Mars flyby. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking about why we should have a Mars flyby in the 2020s, and that's something that I've also briefed the White House on, and with any luck, they'll see some importance in that. My organization, Coalition to Save Manned Space Exploration, and only a few others, ever supported Neil deGrasse Tyson's call to double the NASA budget to 1% or more. Keeping it at under $20 billion forever is not the way to do it. With 1%, we can do about everything that we ever dream of doing. National Space Council is likely to be looking at moon, then Mars, yes, no, whatever. But at any rate, they'll have a lot of experts studying it, and perhaps that can show the best way. Deep Space Gateway or lunar base. If you heard my previous talk, that is all about that. I favor a lunar base that's actually going to let us get the experience we need on the surface of the moon, so we can take that experience and be safe on Mars. In orbit forever around the moon, watching China build their base. Well, that's just spectator seating. Roadmaps. Everything is all about planning. If you're going to clean your house on the weekend, you make a list. I'm going to do the garage, and I'm going to do the basement, and I'm going to do the living room. And if you don't do that, and it's just like, well, I'm going to do some cleaning, then you probably won't have even an idea of what you want to do, when you want to do it, and if you need a mop or a broom. And it's just that easy. We do not have a roadmap that's serious to Mars. We don't. We just haven't. And it's this kind, and they had this sort of multi-mode approach for the last 10 years or so, saying, well, you know, we're just building technology that could be used for whatever we want to do with it. Okay, so in the year 2300, we'll still be debating, well, you know, what should we be doing? And then, you know, I believe all three of the, you know, all three of the new players in space, the president, the vice president, and Jim Bridenstine, do believe the U.S. should remain the undisputed leader in space, and that takes action and planning as well. How am I doing on time? We don't live in a vacuum, and as I said at my early presentation today, we're happy to see China on the moon or anywhere else, but if we're to believe that they won't try to claim the moon as theirs, they're setting a poor example in the South China Sea. And so for strategic reasons, as well as economic and everything else, it behooves us to be on the moon and not to say, well, we won't go, and then maybe find out we can't when we do want to. In conclusion, you know, I think that the President's policies will give us new hope to restore human deep space exploration, real roadmaps to missions to the moon and Mars, a transition to more public-private partnerships. I really can't stress that too much. That is what all three of the players are very strong on. Deregulation of anything that'll make it more costly and so forth, deregulate that. Let's get busy, let entrepreneurs invent and build. Cut regulations, yeah, and go to Mars in the 2030s. So if this is what you want, then I think you will find a new hope in this administration for the space program. We have a few minutes for questions. Happy to take any. Front row.
The 1968 International Space Agreement, I'm not that familiar with it. Did China not buy into it? I mean,
Oh, they did, but you know, all you need to do is give a 1-year notice if you want to be polite about it to withdraw, and you can withdraw. Or, you know, and you know, I point to the South China Sea because that is becoming a battleground as they invade the sovereign territory of other nations. So they probably wouldn't care. You know, they may, you know, withdraw from it or whatever. If we're on the moon, ESA is on the moon, Japan, others, it's not a problem. The problem is that if we're not there protecting our interests, then if Robert Bigelow wants to build a commercial base on the moon, he might hear about it in ways he doesn't want to. So we're kind of protecting our interests there, just like we would protect the interests of any American doing business anywhere.
so opting out in a year is possible, just like opting out of the Paris Accord.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in any agreement, you know, usually you can. Question?
What do you think of the possibilities of international cooperation?
Well, I'm a strong believer of it, and I think that, you know, our ISS partners, and I'll be, I think tomorrow, Saturday when I'm talking, I address this a little bit more, but, and in last year's Mars Society, I was talking about international cooperation. I think our partners on ISS would probably be great partners with us on the moon and Mars and so forth. And And then there's new nations, India, South Korea, UAE, they've all are actually in sort of the process of applying, if you will, to become partners in ISS. And I think they would be great partners. Oh my gosh, India is just going great guns, and I think there'd be a great partner with us.
How about China?
For the strategic reasons and the fact that they steal our technology and use us against us. If you look up the greatest wealth transfer in history, that is China's intellectual property theft and its results. So there's a law for good reason prohibiting cooperation with China on space, because we don't want them to have our highest technology and then use that to beat us.
Can you give some examples of what you would deregulate?
It's not really something I'm an expert on, but those who I do know have their lists. You know, some of the things are, you know, launch. I'd have to kind of defer on that, but you know, if you're going to launch, one of the things is on the Outer Space Treaty. You know, if you're going to, you know, go to the moon or go to an asteroid or something, you want to have some certainty that you're not in violation of that, but you don't want to be unnecessarily hindered or prevented. White shirt in the back.
So the Director General of the European Space Agency is proposing this lunar village as total open source, inviting everybody to collaborate and create this. Where does the Space Council stand on that issue?
Well, the Space Council has not actually started to meet yet. They'll probably be meeting within days or a few weeks. They've been planning to have their first meeting. Now, I'm not speaking for the administration, and they're, you know, and it'll probably be months before they address anything and come out with any recommendations. So, unknown. But I, you know, I think, you know, I asked a top ESA guy a few years ago, you know, if they would like us to work with them on Lunar Village, and they were like, yes, please. A quote from our former NASA administrator, he said that we will not go back to the moon in my lifetime, in spite of our ISS partners begging us to do so. Now, I don't know why or whatever, but that era is gone. I think we can go to the moon. I think we can form all sorts of partnerships that'll be advantageous. Any other questions? Second row, hat.
Russia.
Yeah. Russia is seriously straining the alliance, the ISS partnership. You know, I hope that it is a bit of a break on some of their worst instincts, but would we be a partner with them on the moon and or Mars? I don't know.
Isn't that why we went to the moon, because of the competition with Russia?
It was one reason, and it helped drive a lot of the immediacy and so forth. We were in a space race. We're in a space race today, whether we admit it or not, with China. And it was bragging rights in the 1960s, but it could be more serious now. So interesting things to come.
How do you think it looks for ITAR reform in this administration?
I don't think we'll see much change in that. I'm a supporter of ITAR. I believe that.
The thing is,
yeah.
The intent is good, but it's expanded to the point where it's actually hindering our ability to deal with the rest of the world as far as the space industry, because so many things are covered that even.
Well, sure. I think there's valid reasons for a lot of that. You know, if I see a reform proposal for ITAR that I think addresses security needs and so forth sufficiently, then I might support it. But in general, I think it's doing what it must do, even though there's some costs. Any other questions? We're in the
On the other point, I do believe President Kennedy was working with Russia
There was talk about that. I don't know how that might have changed, but yeah. Any other questions? Back of the room?
I think that a way to really galvanize more support for our space program, I mean, looking at the kind of talent and drive that's involved in planning and trying to figure out, you know, what to do with this. It seems to me that if the same people could somehow be part of some of our social problems, I'm thinking specifically of the housing crisis, of finding different ways to make cheaper housing.
3D printing is sort of a beautiful way of applying technology, you know, cutting edge technology. We're going to be building you know, houses on the moon and Mars out of 3D printing, but they're able to print houses on Earth for a fraction of the price of a stick and stone and 2x4 house. So there's so much that comes out of the space program.
Finally.
China built a 6-story office building.
3D printed? Oh, yeah.
And
Sure.
I was kind of disturbed that the president appointed as the NASA administrator, or at least nominated as the NASA administrator, a man who denies climate change, a man who doesn't respect the overwhelming scientific consensus in this area.
Well, Jim Bridenstine is a serious advocate of human space exploration, and I think that's why he was picked. You know, if you do read look up the American Space Renaissance Act, you'll see a lot of his serious focus on it. And I think the president was looking for a reformer who would, you know, restore the things that the American people are, you know, looking for in terms of us progressing and expanding our technology. You know, everybody here, we want to go to Mars, but if NASA is bogged down with no, you know, none of the road maps or anything else that we need to actually go, then we're just going to be wasting a lot of years and a lot of taxpayers' dollars.
Couldn't you have found anybody who has some respect for science?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. You?
I have a thought that, you know, if they did believe in climate change, wouldn't that create more public support for getting to Mars? Like the threat of climate change would make people more inclined to.
Well, I've heard people say we should go to Mars as a backup for humanity in case, you know, all sorts of disasters happen, including a dinosaur-killing asteroid. All right, that's a good outtake. Mars has, you know, those things have to happen in an orderly and well-planned way. We can't just start sending people to Mars without an infrastructure. You've got to build all of that. So we're not going to have, you know, an instant Mars colony that can ride out any calamity on Earth. But in 100 years, 200-300 years, we'll have self-sustaining colonies there and on the moon and hopefully elsewhere around the solar system. I'm not opposed to answering a few more questions because they're not kicking us out because we're the last ones. Okay.
See, about climate change in a previous speaker, last I heard it had been 10 years since NASA satellites could detect a raise in Earth's temperature when you integrate the northern and southern hemispheres.
Yeah, and I've read that too, and that seems, you know, the satellites have a broad view, and their findings are quite different than some of the ground-based sensor ones, and studying tree rings and adjusting things and so forth. So, yeah. Any other questions there?
Yeah, especially since I think it was launched today, the military
Did that get off successfully? It did? Oh, I'm so glad because the storm's coming. And it was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Yeah.
The solar storm as well. So I guess my question is in regards to sharing of information between agencies, and we talked about oh gosh, it'd be great to have that 1% budget for NASA, but NASA, like we also discussed, was really a space race against Russia in the beginning, and really a military venture with a civilian kind of coding on it. And so I was wondering if that's part of the resistance against funding NASA is because the military now has their own space program and they've got their own agenda there.
Yeah, the two have really coexisted, and there's really no connection on that.
And then, that would lead to my next question would be, is there information sharing? I realize that military, of course, is highly classified, a lot of it, but if there's discoveries made there, is there a protocol to give back to the public through NASA? Like if it's not
Well, anything from NASA is basically public information. You know, with the exceptions being if NASA's launching a classified satellite, as say they would in the shuttle and so forth. But yeah, and any discoveries made are usually on social media before the echoes of the discovery die down.
Yeah. So what you're saying is there's not a pathway for communication really between the military and
Or pathway for communication.
Yeah, I guess whether there was anything set up for, if there's a weird anomaly that they spot, is that
I think if there's a weird anomaly, it'll be on social media within microseconds. But yeah, NASA doesn't filter stuff like curiosity cameras through DoD. It just goes straight onto the web. Yeah. Right. Yes.
So I'd like to preface this question by saying I'm not an American citizen. You said that the U.S. wants to stay the leader in space. Is there a plan if China decides they want to be leader in space and India and Russia join with China? Will NASA kind of go with that coalition, or then will there be two kind of coalitions again? Or is that talked about at all?
Well, I think in the current political scheme of things, India is not very likely to. If for no other reason than China is basically an enemy of India in many ways, and there's partnerships and there's also individual interests and so forth. I believe, and the President, Vice President, and Congressman Bridenstine are pretty well in unanimity that we should remain the leader in space exploration. Doesn't mean we can't work with other countries, but it does mean that if we should not miss out on the big firsts based on the moon, landing on Mars, and that we should be encouraging a great renaissance in commercial space that will transform the world, whether that's all sorts of private bases on the moon and Mars and in orbit. Tomorrow I'm also going to be talking about privatizing ISS after its sort of NASA mission is over. There's actually a law that the 2017 NASA transition authorization says that by that they should plan to transition ISS by 2024, its current extended lifetime, to something where NASA is not directly spending billions of dollars running it, but is more sort of a customer of it, renting space and so forth. And so I'll be going over tomorrow some of the ways in which that can be made into a reality where it's more private plus other international partners, plus commercial partners. You could imagine maybe a pharmaceutical company will put up a module and start doing some really high-tech, work in zero-G for some medicine or something. So there's some of the ways that I think commercial space is going. Anything else? Otherwise, thank you all so very much.